Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Bojack. Welcome to our winter landscape project number 1. This is our first winter landscape, so we have a lot of snow and we have some trees. What I'd like you to focus on today though are 3 different art elements. The first one is value, and value we know are different kinds of light and dark. So if you start with a high value, which is a 10, pure white, and then all the shades in between, and down to the lowest value of all, which is a number 1 on our value chart. We're going to be experimenting with different values today when we add our shadows in our landscapes. The second art element we're going to be focusing on is space, trying to make a 2-dimensional artwork look 3D, as though you're going back into the picture. So space is important today. And the last one is proportion. Proportion is going to show you different sizes of the trees that we're drawing today, and those different sizes are going to help with that effect of making your space look 3-dimensional. So value, space, and proportion. Now, to start our project, what you're going to need is 1 piece of paper. You are going to need a pencil and an eraser if you need one. I'm going to be using a Sharpie marker today. If you don't have a Sharpie, you can use any black marker or a gray marker if you have it, and also a straight edge or a ruler. So these are my tools today. You might want to use a drawing pencil today, and I do have a drawing pencil that I can use. If you have one that is a 2B or a 4B, this one happens to be an ebony pencil, which is the equivalent of like a 6 to 9B pencil, so it's extremely soft. So if you have drawing pencils, this would be a good day to use them. The first thing I'm going to do, girls and guys, is I'm going to go ahead and use my straight edge or my ruler, and I'm going to make a horizon line. And that is going to go straight across my paper, divided up to about either 3/4 to 2/3 of your paper. You don't want to put it in the middle because that's just too boring. So now I have my sky and I have my ground. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and draw my first tree, and the tree is going to go all the way from the top of the paper to the bottom. Now again, if you want to use pencil first, you may. I'm going to go ahead and use my Sharpie. Your first tree is going to start at the bottom and go all the way up to the top of the paper. Now I'm going to add some branches. I'm going to start those about here. Way back in the 2nd grade, if you were in my art classes, we talked a lot about the Y tree and how you can start with the letter Y and you can make your tree with branches that are smaller Ys. We're going to do that again today, but a little bit more elegant. What I'm doing now is I'm thickening up the branches at the base to make it look a little more realistic. Now my second tree is going to be a little bit over to the left. It's going to start a little bit higher on the picture plane. So the proportion is going to change. This one's going to be smaller or shorter. It's going to end up about right here. Okay. The second tree, again, you're going to start some branches about midway. They can overlap the first. And the third tree is going to be about in the middle of my paper, a little bit higher on the picture plane. And again, your proportion is going to get even a little bit smaller or shorter. Tall, medium, shorter. And my next tree is going to be even higher. Now, if you did your picture correctly, what you're going to have you're going to have angles where the trees go all the way back here on an angle, and they get smaller and smaller and shorter as you go back, less detailed. And the same thing happens with the top. Now I'm going to add shadows. And to do that, again, you can use your straight edge if you want to, just to get started. The shadow for the bottom tree trunk is going to be off the bottom of the page. And smear. You can use a regular number 2 pencil for this. A couple things that I added, I darkened my shadow a little bit at the base of each tree to give it a little bit more depth, to improve the feeling of space. I also added a little bit of shading and shadows off to the side. Those would be the shadows of the branches. They're not very defined, but that's okay. Now my sky is also going to be shaded in. My first winter landscape is finished. If you want to do a little bit of extra credit, what you can do is go onto Google Classroom. In my art Google Classroom, I've given you some pictures, colored pictures of some winter birds. There are blue jays and cardinals, a sparrow and a finch, and you can go ahead and add a couple of the birds to this picture. The foxes we'll save for the next project. That'll add just a splash of color here if you like to. What would I use? Probably colored pencil or a little bit of marker. They should be tiny. Our second winter landscape is a little bit different from the first. It also uses all 3 of the art elements that we're working on this week. Again, we're looking for value, different shades of black, white, and gray. We're looking for space, making a 2-dimensional drawing look 3-dimensional. And we're also looking for proportion, which are the changes in size as things get farther and farther away from you, from the foreground to the middle ground to the background. This lesson is actually a little bit easier because we're not drawing branches, we're just drawing tree trunks. Again, it's winter, so it's in the snow. And the first thing that you need to do is get a paper. You need a straight edge, a ruler, a pencil, drawing pencil if you have one, and you can also use a Sharpie. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw my first tree trunk. Now again, you can go ahead and use pencil if you like, or drawing pencil. I'm going to be using my Sharpie to make my first tree in the foreground. This tree is so big that it runs off the top and the bottom. The second tree is a little bit higher on the picture plane. This is going toward the middle ground. And this one is even a little bit higher and a little thinner. Once you've got your trees, and you should have at least 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, I would say between 7 and 9 trees. Then you want to go ahead and add their shadows. Now this time my light source is going to be here. So the shadows are going to be thrown in that direction, and they're going to be thrown on an angle, almost a 45-degree angle. You can use a regular pencil for this, or you can use a drawing pencil for shading. And the most important thing to do here is to make sure that your angle is consistent. So you want to keep exactly the same angle, diagonal, as you bring it up to the next tree trunk. And it's gonna go ahead and go right through the other trees. You also want to make the shadow the same thickness or close to the same thickness as the tree trunk itself. You also want to make sure that you blend each of the shadows to make it look more natural. To make my snow look a little bit more realistic, I added small mounds of snow or hills of snow. Larger ones in the front, smaller ones in the back. Especially around the base of the tree, where maybe some extra snow would have fallen off the branches. And if you've got a little bit of smudge on your fingers, you can just use that to add a little bit of depth, a little bit of shadow to each of those small hills. The next part is extra. If you have extra time left over today, I'd like you to think about what kind of creatures you would find in either of these winter scenes. This scene would be a nice place to find a squirrel, a rabbit, perhaps a fox. So if you look on your Art Google Classroom, I did put some pictures of foxes, and one of them's leaping into the air, which is what they try to do through the snow. And a couple of others. So if you want to look on the Art Google Classroom, or just look right here, and you can try to make your own fox. You could do a deer. You could make a deer. You could cut it out of construction paper and just glue it down, which I think looks pretty cool. This is a really large size. And it would also be kind of fun to add footprints, I should say paw prints, as though the fox was just walking onto the snow. And again, a gentle smear. Okay. You could also draw in your animal if you wanted to, and again have paw prints leading up to it. This was colored pencil and a little bit of Sharpie. What I would like you to do is to email me a photo of each of them, and if you could send them to my email address, and I will give you a grade. Have fun and enjoy, and I can't wait to see your art.